Correct. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, thanks again, ICE, for having us in this year's conference lineup. We're very excited to show you today some things that we think are worth sharing. A little bit of background. My name is Dennis Kleyn. I was already introduced by Davina. I'm the founder and owner of Planet X, a boutique-style studio. And we're specialized in creating visual effects for long-form drama. So that's basically film and television or episodic production. My own background is in directing. I graduated from the Netherlands Film Academy in Amsterdam in 2002, but I switched to visual effects a few years in my career. And our company has grown into actually, I think, the most specialized visual effects company in the Netherlands, and we're around 35 people big at the moment. Our projects range from 2D compositing and CG character animation to a strong focus on CG environments and digital matte paintings. So for us, the step into real-time workflows using Unreal Engine was also mentioned by Matthias in his presentation for virtual production, for filmmaking purposes, of course, was a logic one. And because of that, we co-founded a physical virtual production studio here in Amsterdam in 2022 called Ready Set Studios. So in short, we see more traditional visual effects workflows and more real-time workflows intertwining, which is kind of an interesting and also impactful dynamic. Today, I want to delve a little bit deeper into creating real-time 3D environments with the goal to use them in a virtual production shoot by comparing two approaches. Scanning an existing location, also known as creating a digital twin, which gains you or the makers full control over that location in a virtual production studio, and fictional world building, which is more tailored towards a specific narrative, developed in collaboration with a production designer, for instance, and also other heads of department for a drama series. A quick sidestep before we start. I'm guessing everyone is familiar with what virtual production is. What you see here is a picture of our Amsterdam studio, Ready Set Studios. We, of course, specialize in shooting a particular type of virtual production. The definition of virtual production is the process where the physical and the digital world meet. And this definition refers to any technique that allows filmmakers to plan, imagine, or complete some kind of filmic element, typically with the aid of digital tools. And it's an umbrella term. Virtual production is an umbrella term because VR or motion capture is also considered to be virtual production. But it has become more or less synonymous with the use of LED screens by now. And this is the particular type of virtual production that we are referring to also, which is in-camera visual effects. The purpose of which is to let the crew leave the studio with final pixel results. So you need to capture the final fully rendered visual effects directly in camera during filming. That's always the aim or the goal. So this also means that what you create as content on the LED wall has to have the quality of a final shot. So proceeding into our first case study, the digital twin. By scanning an existing location to create a digital twin, we can bring an existing environment into the virtual production studio as a virtual version. And I think this complements nicely also to what Matthias presented earlier on the procedural city building, although this is a slightly different approach. This was a pilot project in collaboration with the Dutch Film Fund and the city of Amsterdam, with the aim of eliminating the logistical challenges of filming at a busy city center location, and also to avoid headlines like these, where the city is increasingly flooded in recent years by film crews overtaking streets, and for international productions sometimes come in with small armies that are invading the center, frustrating residents all in the already overflowing, like the very tourist crowded areas of the city. So this pilot project was also aimed at looking into the possibility of seeing if we can take those locations away from their physical location and bring them into a virtual version, if you will. So about the operation, the scanning operation itself, in this case, the targeted location was the Leidseplein, the Leidse Square in Amsterdam. And we performed this scan in November last year, so November of 2023. The square is located in or near Amsterdam city center and therefore very crowded almost all the time, day and night. So we needed permits to close off the street, control traffic, and even temporarily sometimes hold off public transport to be able to place scanning equipment and fly around with drones over this specific area. We utilized drone equipment with high-resolution cameras for aerial photogrammetry and LiDAR scanners for precise distance measurements. That's what you see here. And on top of that, also DSLR cameras for capturing detailed images of specific features and also to create the eventual textures that we needed for our 3D model, of course. Our team comprised of a lot of specialists, including pilots to operate the drones, LiDAR technicians, photographers, traffic control personnel, and of course a production team to coordinate all these different moving parts. And of course, each member played an important role in executing this scan during the day. We also secured all the necessary permits that were involved from the local authorities, which involved also detailing our planned flight paths, times, and the nature of the data being collected. There was even a van that belonged to the drone crew that was keeping contact with flight traffic of Schiphol, which is the airport that was not far away, to make sure we're not interfering with any air traffic at that particular time. So there was quite some permits and also quite some parties involved in getting this scan done within the time frame. We needed to cancel also the scanning operation twice, once due to bad weather forecast. It is, after all, November in the Netherlands, so there was a lot of wind, bad weather. And the area was also declared an exclusion zone because of peace demonstrations, which meant that there was a lot of police helicopters flying around, and we could not perform our scanning operation anymore on that particular moment. So we had to move around the scanning operation a little bit. High density area also means constant pedestrians, vehicle traffic, making it very difficult to capture in uninterrupted data, and therefore require quite precise flight planning and also quite precise logistics. And this battle plan shows you how we broke the area down into sections and attached time windows to them. So we knew which part of the group was focusing on which area. And also to make sure that we were not in each other's ways during the scan, but to sequence the operation, if you will. So first LiDAR, then the drone, then the ground photography. So we really kind of chopped that whole process up. Here you can see the results from the LiDAR source after the scan. So this provides a very dense, detailed spatial representation of the square that we scanned. The precision is around 0.3 millimeters of accuracy. So this really served as the ground truth for the space, on top of which we could start building the actual scan. Now, during this operation, we used ground control points that look like this. Typically, they are physical markers. I also have one here with me. This is what it looks like. And they are placed in the environment to serve as reference points for accurate geospatial data alignment. However, in a public and busy area like the Leidseplein, placing our own GCPs was not feasible, as people would step on them or even kick them around. So that would defeat the purpose, of course, of the ground control points. So instead, we used existing landmarks as our ground control points, which are like permanent fixtures, such as unique pavement patterns, for instance, building corners or statues or things that are already existing in that particular location. The added benefit is also that the scan is clear from markers that would otherwise need to be removed to get to a clean environment. So as you can see here, these are actually perfectly contrasty markers already printed on the street almost that we could use for all these cross references. What you can see here is that there is a check going on of all the photos where the same ground control points are identified in different photos from different angles, which would then result in the start of creating a consistent scan with the right placement of all that input. This is, by the way, the UI of reality capture software. We also used cross polarization, which was essential for capturing flat shaded shadowless photographs of all the buildings and surfaces, which serves as a neutral base for our 3D models in Unreal Engine. Cross polarization involves placing a polarizing filter on both the light source and the camera lens, which effectively eliminates glare and reflections from surfaces by filtering out polarized light waves and allowing only the desired light to reach the camera sensor. So what you can see here are examples of cross-polarization photography. So by employing this method, we obtained images that were free from shadows and free from reflective artifacts, because normally ambient lighting conditions can cause those kind of unwanted elements in your photos, so to speak. Because once they are baked into the textures, they can limit the flexibility of lighting within our 3D environment that we're trying to build, because it imposes those lighting conditions into the model, regardless of the desired virtual lighting setup that we want to end up with, of course. So having neutral shadowless base photography, in this case using cross polarization, allows us to kind of fully leverage the Unreal Engine's lighting capabilities, which you can see here in two tests. So we can relight the scene in any way we desire, so move around the light, simulating different times of day, also night in the example on the right, weather conditions, artificial lighting scenarios. So it gives us total freedom of taking this location and then just do the relight with that location that is actually suited to whatever we want to do with that filming production. A little bit about processing all that data. We got home with over, I think, 50,000 images, 250 LiDAR scans from different locations, and around 10 terabyte of data that needed to be processed. So I asked the team to give me something of a representation of the data. So this is what I received. I think it's quite cool. It shows you all the different categories almost of data types. And we organized this data meticulously. So we categorized it into footage, cache files, project files, to make sure that we had easier access to the processing and also better team collaboration, because we knew exactly where to find certain things, and also not to spend too much time on getting lost in that gigantic pile of information, if you will. So it helped us streamline a lot. This diagram kind of shows the workflow of turning the captured data sets into 3D models at the end, so the export at the end. I'm not elaborating on this in detail. I'm not going to go through all the notes, but just giving you a rough idea of the process, and we will touch upon some of the things in this schematic. And I want to emphasize that the set of data you capture from the scanning is, of course, independent from whatever you choose to do with it afterwards and how you process it. So our goal was to create real-time environments in Unreal Engine for filmmaking purposes, but you can just as well process the data differently for other uses, like inspecting infrastructure or topographical surveys. It can serve different purposes depending on your output and the processing of all the data you collect from the scan. A little bit on how the data was aligned and how the data was handled. Data from the LiDAR scan as well as the drone footage were cross-checked to create a good base. So we confirmed both the sources for accuracy. And this process also involved matching points from the aerial images to the corresponding points in the LiDAR data. But you can see here are the results from the drone scan, where each dot represents a capture moment of that drone, and I think also unveiling a very systematic flying pattern to capture the area. This can be seen by the repeating zigzag zone in the overlay. And these drones were pre-programmed to fly within a certain area, make certain movements to make sure that we have a very accurate, very systematic way of capturing all this information. Also, to manage the complexity of this area, we isolated different sections of the Leidseplein into 20 separate buildings. So by breaking down the environment into smaller manageable segments, we could focus better on detailed processing without overburdening systems or risking misalignments on a large scale or making certain choices that were hard to revert. So everything was chopped up into different parts. That also allowed us to organize the DSLR images that we shot into those same sections corresponding with the buildings. So the drone and the LiDAR data provided structural and spatial frameworks, and the DSLR images added the rich textures and the details to the different surfaces, like architectural details, signage, surface materials, are far more accurately represented in these photographs than whatever you can obtain from LiDAR or from the drone in terms of the richness of the image itself. The segmentation also allowed us to prioritize areas of particular interest or complexity, and also to differentiate detailing, decide on what elements should be changeable in real time during the shoot. For instance, certain signage that had to be animated, or maybe there was some flexibility in how we could approach real-time last-minute adjustments on the set. And of course, it also depended on how much of what building are we going to see in detail, depending on the framing of the film in the end. So if they use certain long lenses under certain angles, particular buildings might need more attention because they appear as hero models more than things that are further away or are not featured that much in the end result. So given the project scale, with over 20 buildings, numerous environmental features, the manual processing would have been very time consuming. So we developed a custom Python script that automated batch processing in reality capture software again. So this is again reality capture. And that script streamlined repetitive tasks. So the data importing, alignment, initial processing steps were automated by utilizing this script. And we also implemented a non-destructive workflow, which means that the original data from the data set remained untouched and intact throughout the processing phases. So we worked on copies of the data. We could experiment with different processing techniques, make necessary adjustments without the risk of corrupting or losing original files. And that provided some kind of reliable reference point and ensured also that we could protect almost like the integrity of the original scan data. Now for layout, this is an example of the processed data into a 3D Unreal Engine environment. It is important to stress, I think, that the scene had to be responsive and could be rendered in real time, or should be able to be rendered in real time at all times at a minimum of 24 frames per second, due to the purposes that we have for using it in a film context. So for the results, I already showed some of the examples in the earlier slides, but it's a highly detailed and very accurate representation of the existing Leidseplein, and offering to a certain extent the same flexibility as shooting on a real location, with the added benefit of control over weather, light. We can have it like it can be forever magic hour on our virtual square, and I'm happy to say that this scene was already successfully implemented in an upcoming large feature film, of which the title I can unfortunately not yet mention, but we will be able to do that pretty soon. And that turned out pretty successful. So in a virtual production context, that was really for us a successful endeavor. To move on to the contrasty counterpart to capturing and replicating an exact real-world location, I also want to highlight some steps that we did for a world that we have completely created ourselves, which is like more fictional world building. And for this case study, we used the work that we created for the Belgian science fiction series Moresnet, produced by Caviar Belgium, which premiered in Cannes earlier this year as part of the Cannes series program. The series tells a compelling, mysterious story set across different eras, 2008, 2014, 2024, which also required us to create varied settings in this single environment, which was an underground laboratory that is used for experimentation on brain transplantation. So that sounded quite mysterious and also quite exciting. So we were excited to be involved in this project. Moresnet, so the title of the series as well, is actually a real village which is steeped in mystery. It has a Twin Peaks feel, if you will. Here you can see some pages from the notebook of director Frank van Passel, who is a Belgian director, who had a very clear and inspiring vision for a distinctive look and feel for Moresnet, and really took on the challenge of bringing all the heads of departments together to create a unified look. So that was a really nice collaboration. And we worked closely with production designer Florian Lechters to translate the script into a visual output, because of course that's the whole exercise when you're building a fictional narrative world. So aligning ideas very early on was crucial. We had quite limited time actually to create both the physical and the virtual set. So we started with some stills from existing productions. These are not our stills, that already featured underground labs that the creative team could rank with green, orange, and red stickers to identify what look and style we agreed on. So we used this in an online centralized whiteboard where all the heads of department were part of. So it was a shared whiteboard, if you will, and people could identify which stills they liked and which things they thought were less aligning with the ideas that we had. So our focus was mainly on creating this underground lab that we had to expand virtually, and also with design changes reflecting these different years in which the story takes place. What you can see here is that the orange parts in the render will be virtual production, so that will be our virtual set that we need to build, while the gray parts represent our physical studio in Amsterdam, and that will be the actual real set. So this is where kind of the ideas started to originate, also to make a rotating laboratory, which is something that we could do virtually. So of course not the physical set was able to rotate, but the virtual set was able to rotate. Because also in the story, the CEO of the lab has a disability and he can't walk. So everything had to be friendly he has some kind of advanced wheelchair. And we thought it would be interesting to rotate everything around him, as he is literally the center of attention. He gives out all the orders. And although that idea was really appreciated, it was not implemented because it didn't really kind of serve the narrative for at least this production. But it was a nice way, I think, to show that some of the ideas to leverage virtual production and what you can do with it exceeds what you can maybe do with a physical set, because of the size and the logistical problems that you would incur, and also the cost if you would try to do this with an actual real live set. So we started to visualize ideas from the ground up, so from scratch basically. And we kept an eye on maximizing the interaction and the integration part of the physical set and the virtual set that would extend it. So reflections, for instance, were an important aspect of all the design choices, with a lot of glass, a lot of reflective surfaces used. Virtual production handles reflections better than, for instance, blue or green screen. And the same is true also for special effects like smoke that was integrated into the physical set. Of course, you might be familiar with blue or green screen, which uses keying methods. It's always hard to use glass, reflective surfaces, smoke, water, stuff like that. But with virtual production, because you're shooting it all together as an in-camera end result, you can kind of leverage what you can do with that creatively in virtual production, because we are basically free from the green and blue screen. So I think that's nice that we try to really see where we could benefit from that approach. Now, again, as mentioned, the multiple time periods, subtle differences in the way that the set design behaved. We also had to switch set designs, physical but also virtual, just in one morning. So a really intensive communication between the physical and the virtual art departments was very important to get everything aligned. And within that same alignment, we also pre-planned color schemes, like color temperatures, and also trying to optimize the setups between the on-set lighting, so the real lighting, and the virtual counterpart on the LED wall, because also in your Unreal environment, there are also lights, and there are also lights that need to kind of talk the same language as whatever you want to put in front of the screen. So you can see here an Unreal Engine interface with the lights as icons. And of course you can pick up those lights, move them around, change the color temperature. We had a very good collaboration also with the gaffer, which is the person on the set that is in charge of the lighting, to ensure that it all matched and integrated as perfectly as we basically could. So the real-time art department is actually the virtual counterpart of the physical art department. And those are the artists who control the virtual scene during the shoot. So they are typically part of the on-set crew and in contact with several heads of department. And often the artists that create the scene or created the scene up front are also present during the shoot to make last-minute adjustments or operate anything specific in the scene that was implemented beforehand. And it was fantastic that the art team asked for our input on materials, so we could use existing textures from Unreal's libraries and things that were already available to us, that the art department would mimic instead of usually the other way around. And it was a great time saver, as we didn't need to photograph or copy the real world textures of the set to match the virtual environment, but it was already aligned to begin with, because they just took our textures as a basis and they just painted their set according to our Unreal textures, which was pretty cool. And again, a time saver regarding if you look at the time frame we had to realize this production. This is a zoo level representing all the assets we used in the scene building. So this library allowed for the quickly swapping around of furniture or props to match the different years or periods in the story. And the designs of the medical equipment is focusing on a more modern, realistic lab, so we could match today's, well, what people are familiar with of the medical industry for believability. The same applied to digital extras populating our virtual lab. We had extras also in front of the screen in the studio during the shoot to further blur the line between the real and the extended environment. And motion and body mass are still challenging to implement in digital characters. But for the background activity and also the fact that they had these hazmat suits, which are not very slim, we could get away with most of the mocap and some of the motions that we bought from a library. So here is an Unreal preview render of the underground lab environment. It took around 2 weeks for concept development and around 2 weeks for the actual scene build. and also implementing the assets you just saw, also prepping the digital extras working in the lab, the animations of the robotic arms, etc., etc. So to the physical set building, here's an early look at the physical set. Some areas were updated later, but you can see how the concept art I showed earlier, the lighting, the set plan, and the LED wall all come together here. The colors that you see in the scene when you're on the set and you look at the LED wall often are misaligned with the colors that are being used on the physical set. So the light seems to be off, but once you look through the camera, the truth is really in what you see on the monitor when you look through the lens, because then suddenly it starts to align, and then you also have the more seamless blend between set elements like the floor, mirroring objects in both the fore and the background. And for instance, the robot arm that you see in front is also mimicked in the back. So we try to repeat certain props and certain elements so you cannot tell what is physical and what is virtual anymore, which is of course exactly the purpose of the production, or the way that we approach the production. We also mimicked certain lighting effects in the Unreal scene, like this tube that was part of the real set and had animated light inside it to represent the transfer of the data from one person's brain to another. So the horizontal light that you see in the background is our Unreal scene, and the vertical tube is the set piece you just saw. And also here, adjusting light to make the two appear as one seamless whole is of course needed to, is a collaboration actually between the gaffer and also the virtual art department. To share some results, you already saw some of the rushes. There's some music. I hope I'm still you can still hear me. This is a time lapse for showing the building of the set. And I think what was unique about the approach of this production is how the set was maximizing this use of our studio space, taking up the entire studio, integrating the screen very organically. So it was framed as, if you will, in the structure of the design. And in that way, it really functioned as a portal to extend the space even more, making it drastically larger, adding far more production value. You can tell it looks pretty rich and far more extensive than the physical set alone. So while this video runs out, I'd like to wrap up, conclude the presentation on the two approaches for building virtual production environments. Hope to have shed some light on the different processes and the challenges involved in both processes. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, of course, you might have. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Dennis. What an amazing project to have worked on. It kind of played havoc with your studio though, right? Because you had to kind of give it away for that one project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it really.
So
I think it took around 2 to 3 weeks for the whole studio to be transformed into this underground lab, and then we used the actual walls of the studio to be the walls of the laboratory, so there was no space even for our team. So we sat behind the screen and we had witness cameras observing the set, so we could interact with the crews and work like that. So that was quite something else than what we're usually doing there, because that's a more traditional set with a more traditional set piece. So this was it was quite elaborate in terms of set building as well.
Matt's being cheeky and asking if you kept the design of the lab as the new office, but don't answer that. Do not give him the.
It's the other way around, actually. The production designer used some of our chairs and some of our desks that we already had, and just thought, okay, we can reuse these chairs and elements into the set. So we kind of gave up also some of our furniture to be part of that underground lab. So we went all the way in.
It's amazing. Now, I just we've got a lot of questions that I'm going to start at where we just ended this film project. During the planning and inception phase, what is the feedback, the feedback mechanism with the actual film crew, because they have to sign off on everything? Do they come and
correct.
just like breathe over your shoulder?
No, I think in this case we were really all about efficiency and making things work within a very tight time frame. So I think the more you communicate, because this is the kind of the challenging part for virtual production is sometimes people are used to postpone certain decisions because of, we can fix that in post production or we can just push it along into the production schedule. And with virtual production, you're having quite a heavy productional component up front. So some things that you would normally maybe decide later, you have to decide before your first day of shooting, because of course everything has to come together in that particular virtual production environment. So I think we had a nice collaboration also with the gaffer and with the DOP, and everybody was quite aligned to make this work. So yeah, it was that I think was a good example of how that can work, and also implement the virtual art department into your more traditional workflow, basically.
Brilliant. Teja says that was awesome and mind-blowing. Thank you so much. So let's leave that project behind. Mike is asking, and I apologize for my pronunciation already, but Mike is asking how much time was spent on the Leidse plane project end to end.
Oh, let's remember it. Yeah. I think we started prepping that operation in August, and I think there was around 3 to 4 months of post processing before we could start using it in an actual shoot. So we wrapped up in November, and then we had the shoot in February. So there was a first shoot with that environment. So it was November, yeah, like 3 months, more or less 3 months, with a team, of course, of a few people, like let's say 4 or 5 people.
Okay. Dennis is asking how that multiple government agencies could be interested in true digital twins of the city. Are there political processes to synchronize those efforts?
Yeah, well, in this case, it really helped. I don't know if that's the question, but it really helped that the city of Amsterdam was kind of cooperating with this effort. So it was not only the film fund that provided funding for this pilot, but also the city of Amsterdam wanting to give the permits and speed up certain processes that would otherwise, I think, take much longer. So in that sense, yes, I think it helped a lot that we got that help. Also, there are more places that could be candidates for a similar approach, and also see if we can maybe catch them in a scan to make a virtual copy of them to reduce the strain on those locations, because that's really sometimes a problem in the city here.
There must be places where there's a lot of privacy issues, and certainly countries and cities where that would not even be possible. But you haven't
Correct.
encountered any of that.
Well, I think our focus was so much on the building and all, and we waited for traffic to pass and for people to pass, and of course there were a lot of questions. Some people didn't want to be stopped, so they just walked through. So there are some dynamics there. And of course, when you're shooting a building and people are sitting behind the windows because they're just like eating or something like that, that is kind of intrusive. But if you talk to the managers up front and you get all these permissions cleared, then you can, I mean, yeah, you can get a long way. But it's definitely something to think about when you're going to do a project like this.
Okay, perfect. And lastly, how do you see Gaussian splats technology can support your work in photogrammetry?
Oh, that's a very good question. So the really technical people can better answer that than me. We are experimenting also with Gaussian splatting because it's of course an easier way to capture a certain location that we did now. So I think that is very suitable for smaller projects that we sometimes do when we have to also capture a location, but it's just like a one-off and we need to have a little bit of movement, but we don't have to go around like really extensively like we wanted to do in the Leidseplein, also with a very high detailed scan. But yeah, Gaussian splatting is definitely also something that can have similar results as to what we did here with scanning and the virtual production application. So I don't know. I think my colleague is also joining us on Discord later. So if there are really technical questions, he'd be very happy to answer those.
You can blame Matt for that question. So that you can just you guys can collaborate in a little bit.
Hmm.
But
There are
Dennis,
there's quite some overlap actually between I think what Matt showed with the procedural city and also at the end with filmmaking and virtual production. That part is what we did here, and of course this is harder to scale up to what Matthias showed. Is like really how do you say, well, huge in scale. This is more confined to a certain area.
yeah, yeah, perfect. Well, congratulations on all of your success at Planet X, and we look forward to guessing what large blockbuster that was. So
Keep an
everyone's
eye on the
like, "Ooh, what is it?"
website. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dennis.